about creating your box. The first thing you want to do in creating your box, a lot of you guys are like, yeah, duh, is Extemp Genie. Extemp Genie is awesome. Extemp Genie is amazing. Extemp Genie is an online tool that compiles articles for you. It brings together articles for you. For years, extempers had to slave through creating boxes of thousands and thousands of articles. And then somebody was like, hey, let's just...
Fox News.
Yeah,
somebody BBC.
Somebody was like, most of them were Wall Street Journal, actually. It's funny, I think it was only searching our folders. Or like a couple folders, because all the articles I got were Wall Street Journal that year. And all the articles everyone else got were like BBC or something else. Some people got all Wall Street Journal. It was weird. For years, extempers struggled with questions like this. There's only Wall Street Journal and BBC in my news files. I don't know what to do. Then somebody was like, hey, let's just do it automatically. And now everyone has like 100,000 articles in like a click. So it automatically compiles articles for you. This will give you thousands of articles per day on just about every topic. On just about every conceivable thing that you can think of, it will give you information. For an average of 3 months, it will sync about 90,000 to 100,000 articles. So that's a lot of articles, a lot of information, way more than you could compile just on your own. However, what I'm saying, don't use services like this as a crush or a crutch, not a crush on Extemp Genie. Don't use it as a crutch or an excuse to get out of doing work. That's not what it is. That's not what it is intended to be. It is intended to be something that helps to supplement. It gives you enough analysis and research to be able to use in a round, but you still have to be able to connect that with your own knowledge, with your own understanding of issues. You still have to bring these issues together. Remember, you don't have time to understand an issue in 30 minutes, even if you have all of the articles in the world at your disposal, because you're simply, for most questions, not going to be able to read every single article it has. For instance, I just searched Syria. I think the last 2 months when I left this morning, I searched Syria, just the country Syria, and I think I got 938 matches. You're not going to have time to read all 938 matches. You're still going to have some kind of understanding coming into the round of what you're talking about. So let's talk about how to do this. The second point is topic briefs. And Mrs. Sutton mentioned this yesterday, and I kind of had an idea brewing in my head already about this, but I developed it a little bit more with that. Topic briefs are something that you can use to kind of supplement your understanding of something. And I actually had a couple of these that I just kind of threw together myself last year. But if there's a common issue, write down some facts or opinions about it in a Word doc. Write down maybe a few facts and figures, a few statistics, maybe even write down just a couple opinions about it, or you can also just write down pieces of evidence. You can even collect some specific articles together so that you're more prepared if you have to speak on that topic. Great story about this. The Monday before Cactus Clash, our fall tournament here, I made one of these little topic briefs on Myanmar. I don't remember why. I just had to prep a speech on Myanmar, so I was just like, hey, I'll throw all the articles I used in a Word doc and just save it for some reason. Come finals on Saturday, guess what my question was about? Basically the exact same question I had in club. So I just pull up my little list of articles that I already had, just copy them all down, and I was done prepping in like 6 minutes. If you have these, it can really help to help you understand the issue. However, what you are not allowed to do, and I think this is actually you can't not do this under the rules, is you cannot outline a speech. You cannot have a speech previously outlined going into a round. So you can't have like a topic brief where, hey, if I get a question about Saudi Arabia and oil, this is going to be my question, this is going to be my answer, this is going to be my roadmap, here are going to be my 3 points. You can compile sources, you can compile evidence, but you can't actually pre-outline your speech before you get to the end of it. So make sure that you're not like breaking the rules when you come up with these things, but definitely have some information, have some evidence to back up. Yeah.
And maybe if you were up here, would you be allowed to like make a speech on the topic before you even know it's a topic, then memorize it, and then it'll like the piece printed away, and then recreate it? Because
that would be really hard.
Technically, you don't have the outline.
That would be really hard. Now, there's a couple things you can do on that topic. You probably won't be able to ever do that. One thing that you can do is you can actually go off card. You can actually give a speech without having your Extemp card in your hand. This is something that you only do when you are a senior. You're at a tournament that you don't really care about, and you're just trying to have a little bit of fun. At Veni Vidi Vici semifinals, I went off card, and it was the most stressful experience of my life. Like I've done so many Extemp speeches, I stood up and I was like, oh, what was my article again? I forget, like I have no idea. I made it through, I did well, I wrote, but it was fun. So you can do that if you want, but don't do that until you're like a senior and you're at a tournament that you don't care about and you just don't really care anymore. Okay. Thirdly, you have to compile other articles. Now, a lot of times, the last couple of years, or at least the last year, we got a little lazy and like all of our articles were on Extemp Genie. Don't do that. Have articles from other sources cut and stored in another folder on your computer. Now, you don't have to have a ton, because you should have plenty of information in Extemp Genie, but these are sort of just to have a couple additional articles from a couple additional news sources that you can throw in. A couple that I might add would be Investors Business Daily. You might also be able to add like Breitbart, other sources that might have different perspectives. Just add and cut some articles from other sources. Yeah.
When you say cut article, does that mean you copy and paste it and put it in Word?
Okay, when I say cut article, what that means is you go to a news source, or you go to a page on a news source, you go to print, and you send it to a PDF. So it becomes a PDF of the article on your computer. That came from the olden days when people would actually, the phrase comes from when people would actually have to cut articles out of the newspaper. And so cutting articles kind of became the colloquial term for what you do to get articles down. But basically you just want to take the article from online and make sure that you have an offline copy of it on your computer so you can access it in prep.
Cool. I was wondering about that.
You can use these as a contingency plan or even just as a supplement. A lot of times I will use this, I will have like 10 articles on like really common things coming into a tournament, just in case like my computer doesn't work or Extemp Genie doesn't work, or like something goes wrong, or I just want to have a couple additional sources that I want to throw in there. Definitely make sure you have some other articles as well. Make sure you're adding variety, change which sources you're using. Don't cut articles for a source that is already covered under Extemp Genie. Don't cut extra articles for the Wall Street Journal because they probably already have them all. Make sure you're going outside of that, doing more sources, different sources. You'll have to look at the list of which sources Extemp Genie has. I do not have that memorized off the top of my head. I can tell you for the most part if a source is or is not. But just look at that list and maybe think of a couple other sources for each person, maybe even just one source that people can just plug some extra articles in each week to make sure that there's a little more knowledge out there. Finally, fourth of all, have some miscellaneous supplements. Have some things that you bring into a room that are not news articles, but that will still help give you information. For instance, your box should be composed, what the heck is composed? It's comprised and composed mixed together, so it's a new word now. Basically, it will help you out. Yes. Yeah. No. Basically, you should have some small things that should be able to help you out just past Extemp Genie. Bring books like a dictionary, the CIA World Fact Book, we talked about that yesterday, and the Constitution. Bring those in just to provide a little bit of more background information. Also, if you want to be a really try-hard extemper and you want to make people fear you, you can bring a copy of like The Economist into the room and be like, I have The Economist right here. Anyone want to read it? But you can't because it's mine. Yeah, some people did that, and I just joked with them about it, so yeah, it was a fun time. But anyway, bring some sources in, bring some books in. Also, have documents full of quotes or other introductions that you can use. I know Isabel asked a question about that yesterday, but yeah, you can definitely have quotes stored in a Word document. I have quotes stored in a Word document. I think I have like several people in there that I would mainly quote. I had quotes from Sun Tzu, Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan, Winston Churchill, Edmund Burke, and the Joker. So have some miscellaneous quotes mixed in there that you can reference as you're trying to come up with an introduction. Okay, let's talk about finding articles in prep. How to find articles when you're actually prepping a round. Let's start, whoa, that's boring. Let's start the first one, sort by date. Make sure that you sort your articles by date, especially in Extemp Genie, if you're trying to find them. Again, you're going to have plenty of articles. You're going to have like 940 articles about most topics in Extemp Genie. So you're going to be able to narrow it down a little bit to make the date closer and closer to when it actually is. The most effective articles are going to be the most recent. The best articles, the articles that are best received in an Extemp round, are going to be the ones that were most recent, that happened or were published most recently. For instance, today is August 3rd. So if I had an article from May, that is going to seem less credible than an article from late July, or maybe even August 1st, or August 2nd, or goodness knows, maybe I synced my source this morning, August 3rd. So stuff is going to be a lot more credible if it's more recent. One thing that's really trippy with this is if you get a source from like China or India and you sync it right before the round and you're giving a speech, you can actually cite a source from tomorrow. And you can be, I did that once and the judges were like, whoa. Like, judge, from tomorrow. It was awesome. But yeah, make sure that it's recent. Don't go overboard with it. Not every article has to be in the last 2 days, but make sure it's at least relatively recent if you have the chance. If you sort your articles by date, it can focus it down to the ones that are most useful. You're going to have way too much information to deal with when you have Extemp Genie, or even maybe the articles that you have anyway, so make sure that you narrow it down by date so you can kind of focus how many articles you get. For instance, and I'll do a quick demonstration of this, if I have the Syria thing, I have like 900 articles, and then I narrow it down by date, it'll probably go down to maybe 20, 30 articles in the last week. Those articles are a lot more focused, a lot more specific, and they're a lot more recent, so they're a lot more useful. One of the best ways to find articles, in my opinion, is sorting it by date, because that will both narrow down how many articles you have, so you don't have too much information, and make sure they're really, really useful.
And you've made those hard copy on your, because you can't fix when you're in there.
Yes, you can. It's offline.
Yes?
You have to sync it online before the tournament,
Oh.
but you can. All of those articles are stored in Extemp Genie itself, so you can access them offline. So it's really awesome. Yeah. And I'll do a demonstration of that. I'll actually, when I do my demonstration prep thing, I'll actually turn off my Wi-Fi.
Oh, okay.
Everything will be basically the same as an Extemp prep room, except I'll just be talking through what I'm doing.
And we'll all be watching it.
And you'll all be watching it. Number 2, vary your sources. Make sure that you have plenty of different sources. A lot of times when you search something, you're going to get a lot of results or a lot of responses from one source. A couple sources that do this to me most often are going to be the Associated Press and Business Insider. For some reason, those 2 sources, you search on Extemp Genie, and like the first 3 pages are all about the Associated Press. And I'm just like, I don't want to cite AP 7 million times in my speech. Make sure that you're varying your sources. Make sure you're including several different sources when you're prepping your speech. That will give you more credibility because it will expand the width, how much information you're covering, or how many sources you're actually dealing with. Don't get locked in on one source. Remember that the judges are looking for variety. Even for a great source like the Wall Street Journal, don't get locked into that one source. Make sure you go outside of it. Yeah.
Do you ever adjust the amount of articles it syncs from each source in order to stop like one source from flooding your Extemp Genie?
Usually I don't, and here's why. What Josh is talking about is when you sync articles in Extemp Genie, you can choose to sync like the last 3 months, 2 months, month, 2 weeks, or a week. But within the sync manager, you can actually determine how many articles from a specific source you want to sync. Actually, I'm going to pull that up right now because it's probably hard to understand if you don't see it. So this is Extemp Genie, this is Syria. Actually, I had 4,236 matches for Syria. Okay, so if you go to sync articles and you go to source manager, here are all the sources that there are. You can actually control how many articles per average day it syncs. So it might sync 22 articles, all 22 articles from Al Jazeera that day, or a 97 from AP, or 123 from BBC, 135 from Business Insider. You can change these so it doesn't sync as many. However, the problem is that means you're not getting articles, which means you might not get an article that is really important for you to use if you're giving a speech on something. Also, that means it might not give you articles on more obscure topics, meaning there's an even higher chance that you're going to get an obscure question, you're going to type it into your Extemp Genie search bar, and you're going to get no results. That's going to be the worst feeling in the world. So if you sync all the articles, it's going to be really helpful and really useful. With that said, when I'm talking about narrowing sources, narrowing down how many sources you have, where's my toolbar over here? Give me a second, this is being...
Source diversity.
Yeah, there it is. Okay, so you can turn on source diversity and you can actually get, make sure that Extemp Genie focuses down to a bunch of different sources, gives you a lot of different sources. It actually mixes it up so you don't get like 7 in a row from one source. It'll mix it up. You see how many different sources we have here: Asia Times, Atlantic, BBC, Business Insider, Christian Science Monitor, Fox News, Guardian, LA Times, NPR, New York Times, Reuters, Time. It has so many articles from so many different sources. If you turn on that source diversity, it will give you what relevant articles you can use from specific sources. So make sure you vary your sources. There are plenty of tools to do that, so make it a priority. Varied sources will also ensure that you have different perspectives, that you're not just giving something with a purely conservative bent, but you might also include some slightly liberal perspectives as well. So vary your sources. It's really important to vary your sources and keep them inconsistent, so to speak. All right, number 3. Who saw American Sniper? Who liked American Sniper? Keep your hands up, or you're not an American. Okay. You guys remember the section when he's training on the firing range, and the instructor tells him aim small, miss small? If you aim for something small, your miss is going to be less costly. If you aim for a small point on the target, you're generally going to miss it by a lesser margin. If you just try to shoot like the side of a mountain, you're not going to be as accurate, you're not going to be as specific. The same thing is true when you're trying to find articles. Be very specific in what articles you are trying to find. If you are trying to find an article, aim small. Have very specific search terms. Have very specific things that you're trying to look for in an article. What that means is if you're specific and you can't find something, your miss is going to be less costly. If you're more specific, you're not trying to find one article that proves your entire case, but you're trying to prove just an article for one small piece of proving your case, that miss is going to be less costly. Not being able to find that article is going to be less costly. It's going to hurt you less than it would if you couldn't find an article to quote-unquote prove your whole case. Finally, don't just search around, know what you're doing and what you're trying to find. Remember I talked yesterday a lot about being intentional and being purposeful. The same thing is true if you're trying to find a specific piece of evidence. Know what you're searching for. Know what you're trying to do every time you type a term into the search bar in Extemp Genie, on your local drive, whatever that might be. Make sure you're searching for something very specific. Don't try to bite off more than you can chew. Alright, let's talk real quick about the place of articles. I'm not going to spend too much time going through this. I'm kind of just going to give you guys time to fill in the blanks as I go, not explain it too much. But I just want to give you guys a quick indication of the place of articles in a speech. You're going to see this, hopefully, if I do a decent job, in the speech that I'm going to give in a second. But first of all, articles are the skeleton. Think of articles like the skeleton. You have a skeleton, you have bones in your body. Articles are the exact same way. Articles provide some form of structure to a speech. If your bones are not there, you would just kind of collapse into this blob, and you'd just be on the ground, just chilling there, and you'd just be sitting with no bones. That's not good. Articles are like the bones of the human body. They're not the most important part, but everything would collapse without them. You know, people are going to say the brain is the most important part of the body, the heart is the most important part of the body, whatever you might say. I'm sure like anatomy majors or nurse practitioners or things have arguments about this. I don't know. But I'm sure people have arguments about what the most important part of the body is. I'm sure not many people say the bones, because the bones don't really serve a purpose other than just being there. But if you don't have your bones there, if your bones don't exist, if you don't have the skeleton provided by the articles, by your bones, then you're going to collapse into a blob of goo, and that's not fun. Don't run around with broken bones. Don't run around with bad sources. Don't run around with things that just don't make sense. Don't run around with sources that are inordinately bent towards one perspective or another. Make sure your bones have cohesion, have plenty of article calcium, drink plenty of article milk. Make sure that you don't run around with your bones falling apart, because then your speech will fall apart as well.
If the articles are bones, how can they also be milk?
No, you drink milk from a news source to get stronger articles, get stronger bones.
How far did we carry this analogy?
So far, so far. So what are the cows? The cows are like the senior editors. Which means...
And then the farmer is the corporation.
The farmer is the corporation, which means that the Department of Agriculture is...
The
government.
FCC.
Yes.
You're bunny again.
Your purpose is not to have a bunch of articles. Articles do not exist for their own purpose. You do not have articles for the sake of having articles. They do not have intrinsic worth. You're trying to use the articles as tools to prove that a claim is true. These are tools. These are like screwdrivers or pliers or whatever tool you want to think of. These are ways that you can help to prove something, help to build something, which means a few things. First of all, if any of you have ever built something, you know that you need more than one tool to finish a job, which means you're going to need more than one type of article to prove your claim as well. But you also know that you are not using the tool for the sake of using the tool. You're using it for its utilization. You see, articles are only as good as they are utilized to be. Articles are not good in of themselves, they are only as good as you use them. If you use them badly, the articles are bad. If you use them well, the articles are good. What that means is if you walk out of an extemp speech and say, well, I had a great question, but all my articles were terrible, that means, this is going to sound really harsh, that means you were terrible. Make sure that you are using your articles well, that you're interpreting them well, and using them for a very specific purpose. Finally, never, ever, ever sacrifice analysis. Analysis is the most important part of an extemp speech. Never sacrifice it, even for articles. Your articles should serve to supplement or set up your arguments. Your articles should be the warrants, the justifications behind your claim, but the claims still have to be there. You still have to have a logical analysis behind it. If you sacrifice analysis for evidence, you're really not gaining anything. You don't prove anything by just bringing up a piece of evidence. You prove something based on how you analyze that piece of evidence. Finally, good analysis needs evidence, so make sure there's a balance. To have good analysis, to have a good logical analysis of something, you are going to need to have evidence at your disposal, articles cut at your disposal to be able to use. So that's about all we had for articles.